The morning Cecilia Tran learned what dignity looked like. She was standing at the edge of the East Wing Preview Gallery at Harwick and Lorne with a clipboard she didn't yet know how to use, trying to look as though she belonged there. It was her sixth day. She had spent 5 of them in the back rooms, uncrating canvases wrapped in archival tissue, learning to write condition notes in the house's prescribed shorthand, memorizing the numbering system for lot tags. The preview gallery itself, the long, high-ceilinged room that opened onto the main auction floor, was a different world, pale oak floors. Track lighting angled at the works with surgical precision. The low sound of footsteps on stone, of voices kept deliberately measured, of money moving through a room without ever being spoken aloud. Cecilia had been sent up to restock the lot card holders along the north wall, a simple enough task, and she had been doing it slowly, because she was not quite ready to leave. That was when the woman came in. She arrived at the East Wing entrance alone, without an assistant, without the studied performance of arrival that Cecilia had already learned to recognize in the house's regular clientele, the pause at the threshold, the slow sweep of the room. This woman simply walked in. She wore a dark coat, a single piece of quiet jewelry at her throat, and she carried the kind of stillness that Cecilia, even at 23 and 6 days into the job, recognized as something it took a long time to build. Her bidder's paddle, the numbered card issued registration, was already in her hand. Cecilia went back to the lot card holders. She was not watching. Then she was. The presiding auction director, whose name on the house's internal directory was Garrett Plum, came across the floor in the manner of a man who believed his crossing of it to be, in itself, a statement. He was the kind of authority figure whose confidence lived in his posture and his suit. Cecilia had seen him 3 times since Monday. Each time he had given the impression of a man whose patience for the world was running just slightly ahead of the world's right to demand it. He reached the woman before she had gone 6 steps into the room. He did not wait for an opening. He created one, positioning himself at a slight angle that suggested he was addressing a problem rather than a person. Cecilia did not hear all of it. She was too far. What she caught was the tone first, the particular register of a voice deployed to settle something quickly and without appeal, and then the shape of the exchange. Plum's hand extended toward the paddle. The woman held it. He spoke again. The woman looked at him with an expression that Cecilia would spend a long time afterward trying to describe accurately, because it was not anger, and it was not hurt, and it was not the careful blankness of someone suppressing either of those things. It was simply steadiness, the expression of a person who has been told something incorrect and is taking a moment to confirm internally that it is incorrect before deciding what to do next. Plum's voice rose enough that Cecilia caught the word registration and, a beat later, the phrase "not in our system." The woman's paddle, he was saying, had flagged as invalid. There must have been an error on the intake form. She would need to return to the registration desk on the ground floor and sort it out there. He said it with the brisk finality of someone doing a favor by explaining the process at all. The woman said something short and even. Plum said something sharper. The words Cecilia caught were preview floor and confirmed guests only, and the way he said them made clear that in his assessment, confirmed was a category this woman had not yet earned. 2 of the other preview guests had stopped pretending to look at the lots. A man near the second alcove watched over his shoulder. A woman in a pale blazer near the window turned her back with the deliberate care of someone choosing not to be involved. The woman with the paddle did not look at any of them. She looked at Plum. Then she said, quietly enough that Cecilia only caught the cadence and not the words, something that did not sound like a concession. Plum's chin lifted the way chins lift when the person attached to them has decided the conversation is over. She did not move toward the door. She reached into the interior pocket of her coat and produced a phone. Cecilia turned back to the lot card holders. Her hands were not entirely steady. She had seen enough in 6 days to know that scenes on the preview floor were, in the house's culture, close to unthinkable, and that whatever was happening here was approaching the outer edge of that word. She told herself it was not her business. She told herself she had a clipboard and a task, and a job she had been trying to get for 2 years, and she arranged a lot card in its holder with more care than it required. Then she looked up at the archway. She had been through the East Wing entrance a dozen times in 6 days. The archway that separated it from the main gallery was dressed in pale stone, and mounted on the keystone of the arch, at eye level for anyone pausing in its frame, was a rectangular bronze plaque. Cecilia had read it on her second day, without particularly registering it, the way you read a plaque when you are new somewhere, and trying to absorb everything at once, without absorbing any of it. She read it now. The East Wing, Harwick and Lorne Fine Arts Foundation, endowed in perpetuity by the principal benefactor in recognition of 22 years of partnership with gratitude and regard, and beneath that, in letters slightly larger than the rest, a name. Cecilia looked from the plaque to the woman on the phone. The woman was speaking quietly, one hand resting at her side, the paddle still held loosely in the other. Her posture had not changed. She did not look at Plum, who had taken a half step back but had not moved far enough to remove himself from the situation. The half step of a man who has not yet decided whether to press further or wait to see if the problem resolves itself. His expression carried the particular strain of someone who has staked a position publicly and is beginning to calculate what it will cost to hold it. The woman ended the call. She put the phone back in her pocket. She looked at the plaque. Then she looked at Plum and she said something. Whatever it was brief. Plum followed her gaze to the archway, to the plaque on the keystone, to the name in the larger letters. The color in his face did something complicated and rapid. Cecilia set the clipboard on the shelf below the lot card rail and stood very still. The next 9 minutes happened in the measured, slightly underwater way that consequential things sometimes happen in quiet rooms, each action distinct, each pause deliberate, the air in the gallery rearranging itself around what was occurring. A house associate appeared from the back corridor at a pace that suggested she had been summoned rather than dispatched. She spoke to the woman briefly, listened, and then moved toward the internal stairway with a purpose that was visible from across the room. Plum stood where he was. He had not spoken again. The man near the second alcove had stopped pretending entirely and was watching openly. The woman in the pale blazer had turned back around. The woman herself had not moved from the spot where Plum had intercepted her. She had not sat down. She had not sought out a chair or a wall to lean against, had not performed distress for the room's benefit, or attempted to recruit the watching guests into the narrative of what had happened to her. She stood where she was, and she waited, and her face held the same steadiness it had held from the beginning, and if anything it had grown more settled, the way things settle when they are about to be confirmed. The foundation director arrived in 11 minutes. His name was Gerald O.C. Mensah, and Cecilia would later learn that he held the house's second highest administrative rank under the parent foundation structure, a rank that placed him several levels above the presiding auction floor director in matters of institutional relationship. He came through the East Wing entrance from the street side, which meant he had come directly from the foundation offices 6 blocks away, which meant, though Cecilia did not calculate this until later, that he had been on his way before the call, or had left the moment the call ended. Either way, he had not been slow. He greeted the woman by her name, which Cecilia heard clearly across the gallery floor, and which was the same name on the plaque. What followed was not a scene. That was the thing Cecilia kept coming back to later when she tried to explain it to people who asked. It was not a confrontation. It was not a performance. It was a process, deliberate, documented, and without a single raised voice. Gerald O.C. Mensah spoke briefly with the woman, then turned to Plum with an expression that contained no heat whatsoever, only clarity, and informed him in language that the nearest guests could hear that he was being placed on administrative suspension effective immediately, pending a formal HR review, and that the matter would be documented in full. A house administrator materialized from the corridor, as though the building itself had understood what was needed. O.C. Mensah signed something on the administrator's clipboard. Plum received a copy. His hands, Cecilia noticed, were still. The woman's bitter's paddle, which had never, O.C. Mensah noted for the room, contained any error. The registration had been correctly processed from the first moment, was formally reinstated on the record. A written apology on the foundation's letterhead, O.C. Mensah said, would be delivered to her before the afternoon session opened. It was. Plum was escorted from the floor, without drama, without raised voices, without anything that could be described as cruelty. He walked out the way people walk when the weight of a decision has already been made, and there is nothing left to negotiate. The door settled behind him with the soft, definitive sound of a well-made room. Cecilia realized she had been holding the clipboard against her chest for the last 11 minutes. The woman stood for a moment in the gallery after the administrator, and O.C. Mensah had stepped aside to complete the paperwork. The preview room had gone on around her. The other guests had returned, with varying degrees of naturalness, to the works on the walls. The light was the same light it had always been. The pale oak floor the same floor, the track lights still angled with their surgical precision. Only the East Wing entrance was different now, or seemed different, the plaque on the keystone catching the light in a way it had not caught it in Cecilia's awareness of it before. The woman looked at a painting near the north wall for a long moment. A small canvas, dark ground, two figures and a doorway. She tilted her head, the way you tilt your head when something is telling you something, and you are in no hurry to look away. Then she turned and saw Cecilia. Cecilia did not know what her own face showed. She had been standing still for long enough that she suspected the answer was everything. The woman looked at her with the same steadiness she had worn throughout. Not warmth, exactly, or not only warmth, but something more considered than that. Recognition, maybe. The recognition that someone young had seen something real and that it was worth acknowledging. She nodded once before she walked toward the main floor. That was all. No speech, no summation, no invitation to draw the lesson out loud. Cecilia stood at the lot card rail with her clipboard and watched her go, and the gallery held the same quiet it always held, and the bronze letters as above the archway caught the track light in the same even way they had. Always caught it, and it was 6 years before Cecilia stopped thinking about that nod. And then it was only because she had stopped needing to think about it and had started simply knowing it. The way you know the things that were never explained to you because they were shown. Dignity, she had learned that morning, does not argue. It does not perform. It does not raise its voice or seek an audience or to demand the room's sympathy before the facts have had their say. It stands in the center of the floor in a quiet coat with a paddle in its hand, and it waits for the truth to arrive through proper channels, because the truth, when it is real and the channels are clear, is never late for long. The East Wing still bears the name on the plaque. The afternoon session opened on time, without delay, without reference to what had occurred in the hour before it. The work in Lot 47 sold for 3 times its estimate, and the woman who had built the room around them placed the winning bid without once raising her paddle above the level of her shoulder.